So, have you ever experienced this? You're just standing there having what seems to be like a perfectly normal conversation.
Right, just a completely standard chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Someone asks you a relatively simple question in English, and suddenly, completely without warning, your brain just
Oh,
stalls.
yeah. Total system
Well,
failure.
it starts whirring and grinding, like one of those really slow dial-up internet connections from like 1998.
That is a painful sound to remember.
I mean, you can almost hear that awful static noise in your head while you just stare at them completely blank.
Well, that static noise is actually the sound of pure cognitive overload.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a universal experience for anyone learning a second language,
Yeah.
and it happens because your brain is just trying to do way too much work behind the scenes,
Right, because you aren't just answering a question. Your brain is running this like secret, complex, four-step assembly line.
which is exhausting.
It really is. I mean, first you hear the English question, then you mentally translate that question into your native language.
Taking up valuable time.
Exactly. Then you formulate your answer in your native language. And finally, you try to translate that answer back into English before you actually, open your mouth to speak.
It is just an incredibly heavy lift for your working memory.
Oh, for sure.
And that's exactly why we're looking at the source material for today. It outlines a really practical, step-by-step method to permanently dismantle that mental assembly line.
Which is so needed. So the mission of this deep dive today is to figure out how to stop translating word for word in your head.
Yes, exactly, and to start thinking directly in English.
Well, we really have to figure this out because there's this observation from the text that just hits, well, a little too close to home for me.
Uh-oh, what is it?
It points out that by the time you go through that entire four-step mental translation process, the person you are talking to has already finished lunch, traveled to another country, and started a new life.
That is painfully true.
Right. I mean, you're standing there trying to find the perfect verb conjugation, and the conversation has completely left you behind.
Native speakers respond in like 2 seconds.
Meanwhile, we have this tiny, completely overworked translator living inside our heads. So the goal today is to basically fire that tiny translator.
I love that.
Yeah.
But to do that, we first have to understand why that tiny translator was hired in the first place.
Oh, right.
Translating is not inherently bad. It's actually a necessary cognitive scaffold.
A scaffold, like for a building.
Yeah, exactly. When you first start learning a new language, your brain just relies on your first language as a foundation
Mm.
because, I mean, it's the only frame of reference you have to decode these new foreign sounds.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if it's a natural biological scaffold, like you're saying, why is it such a huge problem long term?
Well, think about,
Actually, wait, it reminds me of running a software emulator. Like if you've ever tried to run an old video game or, say, Mac software on a Windows PC, you have to use an emulator.
oh, that's a really good way to look at it,
Right, because it technically works, but the computer has to run two operating systems at once.
which is just a massive drain.
Exactly, it eats up all your RAM, the internal fan starts spinning aggressively, and everything just slows to a total crawl. You're burning so much processing power just to run a really simple program.
That is the perfect analogy. Mental translation is literally cognitive emulation.
Oh, yeah.
The issue isn't the scaffold itself. The issue is when running that emulator becomes a permanent habit.
So it's like leaving the emulator running forever.
Right. If someone says, "How was your weekend?" and you translate every single word of that sentence into your native language, you are eating up all your mental RAM.
You get totally bogged down in the mechanics.
Exactly. You're focusing on the mechanics rather than the actual meaning.
So how do native speakers actually process language then? I mean, if they aren't running an emulator, what is happening in their brains?
Well, they aren't thinking about words at all, really.
Wait, not at all.
No, natural language processing is actually highly sensory. It's conceptual. You don't hear a word, look up its definition in some internal mental dictionary, and then understand it.
Right, that would take way too long.
Exactly. You hear a phrase,
Yeah.
and your brain instantly pulls up an image or a feeling or like a situational concept.
Okay, so if I say to you, a big brown dog is sleeping under a tree, your brain doesn't pause to translate big, then brown, then dog.
No, not at all.
You just instantly picture the dog. You actually see the shade of the tree in your mind.
Yes, exactly.
Or, okay, consider this scenario from the text. You're late for school and your bus is leaving.
Right, and what happens when you hear that?
I mean, you don't see a textbook grammar exercise.
Definitely not.
You see yourself sprinting down the sidewalk, waving your arms, running for the bus like some kind of action movie hero. You can actually feel the panic in your chest. You see the red taillights pulling away.
What's fascinating here is that the exact moment you visualize that action movie hero, you are already successfully thinking in English.
Wait, really? Just by seeing the image?
Yes, you have completely bypassed your native language. You took the English sounds and drew a direct neurological line straight to a concept.
Oh.
And that direct connection is the exact superpower we need to cultivate.
Okay, that visual trick sounds great in theory. But what if my vocabulary is basically non-existent?
That's a common worry, yeah.
Don't I need a massive mental dictionary of thousands of English words before I can even attempt to think entirely in concepts?
No, and honestly, that is one of the most pervasive myths in language learning. It holds a lot of people back.
Really? So you don't need a huge vocabulary?
Not at all. You do not need a massive vocabulary to abandon that native language bridge. The goal here is direct thinking, not complexity.
So the simplicity of the thought is actually an advantage.
Precisely. I mean, you can start thinking directly in English with incredibly basic phrases. Things like, I'm walking, or the weather is nice, or simply, I need milk.
Just really basic stuff.
Yeah, your brain can handle that direct conceptual link without needing the heavy emulator to process it.
Okay, imagine waking up tomorrow morning and suddenly you are in a place where everyone around you only speaks English.
Just dropped right in.
Yeah, your native language is completely useless. Nobody understands a word of it.
Well, your brain would instantly enter a state of survival mode.
Exactly. You wouldn't have the luxury or even the time to translate every single sentence in your head.
You'd freeze up if you tried.
Your brain would panic for a second, and then it would immediately start looking for cognitive shortcuts. Even if that shortcut just meant, pointing at a cup of coffee and saying simple words.
Right, just getting the point across.
You would bypass the translation assembly line out of pure necessity just to communicate your basic needs.
And that shortcut method, that survival mode, it closely mimics how natural language acquisition actually works.
Oh, I see.
You don't wait until you have the perfect grammatical structure to speak. You use whatever tools you have directly and immediately.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because a massive takeaway from the sources is that fluency actually comes before perfection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Fluency isn't about using the most sophisticated vocabulary possible. It's about the speed of the connection between the thought and the word.
That is a critical distinction to make. Because in real-world communication, speed and flow are always prioritized over grammatical perfection.
Always.
Let's say you've had a really long day at work. It is far better, and honestly far more conversational, to quickly and directly think, I'm tired, and just say it out loud.
Instead of stalling.
Right, instead of stalling the conversation for 10 silent seconds while you try to mentally construct this complex sentence like, I am currently feeling quite exhausted.
Because the other person doesn't care if you use the word exhausted. They just want to know how you feel so the dialogue can continue.
Exactly.
But if the bar is really that low and simple words are enough, why do so many learners who can sit through a 2-hour Hollywood movie without subtitles still completely freeze up when they have to order a coffee?
It's a great question.
I mean, they clearly know the words, right?
They do. It all comes down to the neurological difference between passive consumption and active production.
Passive versus active. Okay.
Right. When you watch a movie, you are a passive learner. You are just receiving the language.
Because the movie is doing the work.
Exactly. The context, the actor's facial expressions, the soundtrack, they are doing all the cognitive heavy lifting for you.
That makes a lot of sense.
But to actually think in English, you have to transition from being a passive consumer to an active internal narrator.
Oh, I like that, active internal narrator.
Yeah, because the neural pathways for comprehension are completely different from the pathways required to actively generate language in your own mind.
So we basically have to force the brain to generate the language itself. And the strategies for doing this from the text are actually quite simple, starting with what they call the room challenge.
Yes, the room challenge. It is an excellent way to force that active production, but without the pressure of a real conversation.
Right, so you just look around the room you are in right now, and without speaking out loud, you start naming the basic objects you see entirely in English.
Just scanning the room.
Yeah. Chair, desk, lamp, window, phone. You are literally forcing your brain to make that direct visual connection to the English word, actively retrieving it without using your native language to get there.
And because you're dealing with real, tangible objects in your immediate physical environment, the translation step feels entirely redundant.
You don't need it.
Exactly. You don't need to translate chair into your native language when you're looking right at the physical chair. It roots the language in reality.
And then once you master the objects, the text says you can graduate to the sports commentator technique.
This one is highly entertaining.
It really is. You essentially narrate your own mundane life as if you were a sports broadcaster calling a high-stakes match.
Like a play-by-play.
Yeah. Imagine narrating your morning routine. Paul enters the kitchen. He looks confused. He searches for coffee. The coffee wins.
I love that. It forces you to string together those simple actions and objects into a narrative flow. You're moving from single, static words to active, dynamic situations.
And it turns incredibly ordinary, boring moments like making the breakfast, waiting for the bus, or just walking down the street into completely free language practice.
Absolutely free.
You become the active narrator of your own reality.
And more importantly, it lowers the stakes.
Yeah.
You aren't in a classroom. You aren't being evaluated by a native speaker.
So nobody's judging you.
Right. You're just observing your own reality.
Right.
It builds that internal active voice in a completely safe environment.
But wait, what happens when that internal sports commentator suddenly hits a wall? Like if I'm narrating my life, making coffee, doing great, and then I encounter a concept I just don't know the word for, does the whole system just crash?
Yeah, it does for a lot of people,
Yeah.
yeah. And it often triggers this highly relatable kind of cognitive paralysis.
Oh, I know that feeling.
There's a great anecdote in the source material about a learner who is trying to practice this internal narration. They are outside, and they see a bird flying by.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. Now, the direct, simple thing to do would be to just see the animal and think the English word, bird. But instead, their brain goes into absolute overdrive.
Right, the mental monologue becomes a total disaster. It turns into, wait, what's the word? Okay, let me translate the word for bird. Yes, let me confirm it is bird in my native language. Let me verify the pronunciation of bird. Is it a noun?
Exactly. And while the brain is running that exhaustive, ridiculous verification protocol, using up all that processing power, what happens?
The bird is gone. It flew away 10 seconds ago.
Exactly.
The moment has completely passed because they overcomplicated a totally simple observation. The solution, the text says, is ruthless direct connection. No middle language. Just see the bird, think bird, and keep moving.
Right, and this highlights several major pitfalls that learners fall into. We really need to navigate these common mistakes. The first one is translating word for word, which is especially problematic with idioms.
Oh, yeah. Like when someone says, what's up?
Right. If you run what's up through your mental emulator and translate it literally, it makes absolutely no sense.
You'll be looking at the ceiling trying to figure out what is physically above you.
Exactly. Language isn't math. The solution here is to learn phrases as single units of meaning, not as individual words to be decoded. What's up is simply a unified sound that equals a casual greeting.
So don't decode the words, just connect the phrase to the social concept. That makes sense. But what about when you just completely blank on a specific word, like the total deer in the headlights moment? The source calls it the umbrella panic.
Oh, the umbrella panic. It's a classic fight-or-flight response in language learning. You're trying to narrate your day or you're in a real conversation, and you suddenly forget the word for umbrella.
And panic sets in.
Total panic, because you feel like you cannot proceed without that exact puzzle piece.
The brain just stops all processing. It just freezes.
But there is a cognitive workaround for this, known as circumlocution.
Circumlocution.
Yes. The goal is to keep the flow moving.
Yeah.
If you forget the word umbrella, you don't stall the conversation in silence. You just say the thing you use when it rains.
Oh, right. The rain blocker, the
Yeah.
water shield, whatever it takes to communicate the concept.
Exactly. Native speakers actually do this all the time when they have a tip-of-the-tongue moment.
That's so true. It sounds far more natural to explain the missing word using simpler English than it does to freeze in absolute silence for like 15 seconds.
Precisely. And the third major pitfall is allowing yourself the luxury of overthinking. You have to artificially induce a little bit of that survival mode we talked about earlier.
By setting time limits, right?
Yes. When you are practicing your internal narrator, ask yourself questions like, what do I want to do this weekend? And then force an immediate answer.
Don't give yourself time to stall.
Right. Do not give yourself 10 seconds to translate and construct the perfect sentence. Force the answer out in 2 seconds, even if it is just watch movie.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I mean, many learners simply quit at this stage because forcing yourself not to translate feels incredibly difficult. It feels like walking through mental mud.
It is deeply taxing on the brain, but it is vital to reframe how we view that cognitive difficulty.
How so?
Well, difficulty does not equal failure. When your brain is hurting, when you are struggling to find the shortcut around your native language, that struggle usually means growth.
Oh, I see.
It means you are physically forging new neural pathways instead of just walking down the old familiar translation road.
So the struggle is actually the proof that the workout is changing your brain architecture. That's reassuring. So, okay, we've stopped panicking, we've fired the tiny translator, we're narrating our lives and bypassing the emulator.
We're doing great.
But right now, this internal monologue still sounds a bit, well, robotic. How do we take this direct thinking and polish it so we actually sound natural as participants in a conversation?
Right. Because direct thinking is the foundation, but polishing the language is what builds real rapport. There are specific, subtle tweaks from the text you can make to your vocabulary to instantly sound more conversational.
Oh, yeah. For instance, swapping out the phrase I think for the phrase I guess?
Yes. I think it's going to rain. Sounds a bit formal, almost like a rigid declaration.
The bit stiff.
But I guess it's going to rain immediately softens the tone. It creates space for the other person to agree or disagree. It is much more cooperative and relaxed.
Another subtle one I saw is swapping out very for really. Like instead of saying I am very tired, which sounds like a textbook exercise, you say I'm really tired. It's just punchier.
It is. And perhaps the most impactful tip for sounding natural is to utilize small reaction phrases. These are the little verbal nods that keep the flow of a conversation alive.
Things like, really? No way, that makes sense, or I know what you mean.
Exactly. These are conversational lubricants. They don't require you to construct a massive, grammatically perfect response, but they show the other person that you are actively listening and engaged.
And they buy you time, right?
Yes. Furthermore, they buy your brain valuable processing time while making the whole exchange feel entirely organic.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? How do we distill all of this, the visual connections, the sports commentator, the reaction phrases, into a concrete routine you can actually do today?
Well, the text breaks it down into a really simple 3-step daily habit.
Right.
And the brilliance of this routine is that it relies on frequency, not duration. It doesn't require setting aside hours of painful study time.
Step 1 is in the morning. When you wake up, do the room challenge. Name the physical objects around you in English. Coffee, sink, mirror, keys. Just get the brain firing directly in English before you even leave the house.
Perfect. And then step 2 happens during the day. This is when you deploy the sports commentator. As you go about your day, describe your actions to yourself as you do them.
I'm walking to the car. I'm opening the door. The traffic is terrible.
Exactly. Keep it simple, keep it active, and use circumlocution if you get stuck.
And finally, step 3 is at night. Spend exactly 1 minute, just 60 seconds, thinking about your day in English before you go to sleep. Lunch was good, work was busy, I'm really tired.
That's it. Morning objects, daytime narration, 1 minute of nighttime reflection. Doing this consistently for 5 minutes every single day will rewire your brain's pathways much faster than staring at a grammar textbook for 3 hours on a Sunday.
Because you are actively training the direct connection every single day, if you stick to this routine, and if you learn to tolerate the temporary awkwardness of not using your native language as a crutch, you will eventually reach a breakthrough.
You really will.
You will hear English and you will understand it immediately. You will speak it faster without the mental lag. The tiny translator will be permanently retired.
It is a profound shift in how your mind operates. And, well, that actually brings us to a final thought to ponder.
Oh, yeah. The text brings up an interesting point here.
It does. It asks where you would go if you had one day in an English-speaking country. But building on that, if removing the mental translation barrier truly allows you to think instantly in a new language, do you think doing so actually changes your personality?
Wow.
Right. When you bypass your native language entirely, the language you grew up with, complete with all its cultural baggage and specific ways of framing the world, do you become a slightly different, perhaps more direct version of yourself when you operate solely in English?
That is a totally wild thought. Are we fundamentally different people when we finally fire the translator? I mean, we will leave you to chew on that one. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Definitely try that 1 minute nighttime reflection exercise tonight.
Take care and keep thinking directly.